Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about natural selection. We're going to talk about the components of natural selection and what that means for different organisms and different species diversity in general. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is natural selection? So natural selection is a mechanism by which individuals that have inherited beneficial adaptations produce more offspring on average than other individuals. So what does that mean? So we have a comic up here of these different birds, and they are choosing to eat these green beetles. So we have a population here of green beetles with some orange beetles in between. And so what do we think is going to happen if these birds like the green beetles? Well, which beetles are going to reproduce the most? So it's obviously going to be these orange beetles, because if we eat more of the green beetles, then we'll have more orange beetles to reproduce. So what's that going to happen to that population? So that population is going to create more orange beetles. And so this is basically the basis of natural selection. And this is how species kind of adapt to their environment. So in order for natural selection to occur, the trait must be heritable. So it must be a heritable trait. It must be involved with a genetic disposition. In nature, the environment selects which organisms survive and which organisms die off. So these organisms that are more adept at living in their environment are going to survive over the organisms that aren't as fit to live in their environment. So that's natural selection. Then we'll talk about artificial selection. So artificial selection is different than natural selection. It still involves heredity and traits being passed down from one generation to another. But artificial selection is done by humans, and we do this a lot with crop production. We do this a lot with cattle. We also do this with our pets. So we manipulate nature in order to produce organisms that benefit us. So you see here, we have corn. Thousands of years ago, this is what corn looked like. And through artificial selection or humans manipulating corn, we now have modern corn that looks like this. So this was manipulated by humans. Same with this banana here. This is a wild banana, has seeds throughout the banana, and we have modified it basically to look like a modern day banana. And we do this with cattle as well. This is an example of a cow that was modified to be more muscular to benefit our cattle industry. And then over here, we have different dogs that we have modified or selected to have different jobs. And so some of them are just, we want them to look a certain way, or we want them to act a certain way. Some of them we want behaviors to help us with our cattle, or we want behaviors to help protect our family. Different things are bred for different reasons. So artificial selection is when humans make use of the genetic variations in plants and animals by acting as a selective agent instead of nature. So in natural selection, the selective agent is nature. In artificial selection, the selective agent is us. So, but going back to natural selection, we have an exponential population growth. So this is a population that's growing that doesn't have any deterrence from its growth. So it's producing more offspring as it's producing more offspring than itself. So we have exponential growth here. And this is actually human population growth at the moment. Human population growth is a little bit different because we are able to manipulate our resources, but eventually we will stop exponentially growing and we will kind of even out. So other organisms and other animals, other species have what's called a carrying capacity. So carrying capacity basically kind of starts to even out this exponential growth. So if this is a growth of a species, the carrying capacity might be lack of resources. It might be lack of prey. It might be lack of water. It might be lack of habitat. All of those can can manipulate carrying capacity. So let's say a population of hawks is growing exponentially. It's growing exponentially because it has plenty of prey. So let's say there's a mouse population down here. And the mouse population is pretty high at this point, and so the hawks are able to grow and grow and grow. Eventually, there will be too many hawks eating the prey, and so it'll start to lessen. And so as the hawk population lessens, then the prey population, or the mice, will increase, and so the hawk population will then increase. So at this carrying capacity line, it's not just smooth, it's going to fluctuate up and down like this. And it's going to fluctuate based off of its prey population. So this carrying capacity keeps the populations lower and resources stable. So fitness is what is going to help a species in its population. So a species might be fit for a certain biome or a certain ecosystem, but then not fit for a different ecosystem. So say a polar bear is fit for an Arctic ecosystem. Well, if we put it in the middle of Texas, it would not be fit for that ecosystem. So fitness is a relative term, and it really determines what ecosystem it is in. But fitness is a measure of the ability to survive and produce more offspring relative to other members of the population in a given environment. So you have this population of a species, and certain characteristics within that species will allow that organism to reproduce at a higher rate. So let's say we have a population of moths, and a certain amount of those moths can blend in with the environment, whereas other moths might be a little bit brighter in color, and so the birds that prey on them can see them easier. So they're more likely to get eaten than the moths that kind of camouflage in with their environment. So the fitness level of those moths that can blend in will be higher than the fitness level of those moths that can't blend in. So changing environments. So environments can also change, and that's kind of one of the pillars of natural selection. So if an environment changes just a little bit, then other characteristics within that species might be better fit for that environment. So we talked about the peppered moths in class, and pre-industrial revolution, these pepper moths, there were certain colors of pepper moths that blended in with the environment better than the other color of peppered moth. After Industrial Revolution, when there were more soot on the trees, the other color of moths were able to blend in better. So that made it so that those moths survived better than the other colored moths. And so with that, they were able to reproduce more, and the color of the population as a whole mostly changed to the color that blended into the new environment. So the same here with the finches. It was noticed that there were finches on separate islands. They were very similar, but they had different beak sizes based on what food source was available on each island. And so they experienced a drought, and some of their food sources were not as abundant. And so over time, those beak sizes changed so that populations that could adapt to eat different types of food that was still available could do that. So over time, through generation and generation, those that had the appropriate beak sizes for the food that was available were able to reproduce. Okay, so that is the basics of natural selection. In our next video, we'll talk about genetic variation within a population. Remember, you can always rewind and go back to whatever you would like to see again. This video will stay on our channel throughout the year, so feel free to go back before tests or when you want to brush up on new concepts.